Good evening and welcome to the Ombudsman program. My name is Diane Wellborn. I am the Ombudsman and I'm going to be your host for this evening's program. I am delighted to have with me tonight Magistrate Judge Michael J. Newman of the Southern District of U.S. Federal Court System. I hope I got all that correct.
Yes,
okay,
good.
very good. And we are going to be discussing our federal court system and specifically the activities of the court here in Southern Ohio. So I would invite any callers that have questions for the program. You will see the number on the screen, and we welcome your comments and questions. But now let's get started, okay?
Great to be here, Diane,
I'm very,
thanks
very
for-
happy to
thanks for
have
inviting me.
you here. Now, you became a lawyer by attending
American University
University Law School.
Graduated in 1989.
In 89, and then you went to clerk after that?
Right. Actually, Judge Rice from the federal court here in Dayton was responsible in many ways for helping me to get a clerkship. We met when I was a law student at American University in Washington, and I wanted to come to Ohio. My dad had gone to the University of Cincinnati many years ago. He's passed away now, and Judge Rice and I hit it off and became friends really right away. And there was a new magistrate judge, which is what I am now, but at that time in '89 there was a new magistrate judge, Jack Sherman, who had been appointed in Cincinnati, and Judge Rice very kindly reached out to Judge Sherman, and Judge Sherman was looking for a clerk, and the stars aligned, and I moved to Cincinnati, and there we are. And I stayed in touch with Judge Rice and worked on many projects with Judge Rice in the years thereafter.
That's wonderful. How long have you been in our court system?
So I will be a magistrate judge for almost 5 years. 5 years this summer. I was appointed in July of 2011.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And was a lawyer for many years before that in Cincinnati. I was a law clerk for the federal court system, the trial court where I work now. And then I was a law clerk on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals for Judge Jones. Did appellate work, and then I went to Dinsmore and Scholl, and I was first an associate, then a partner, and then I did a lot of pro bono work there as well as work for clients.
That's great. How were you selected for the position that you're in now?
Well, there's two kinds of judges in our court. There are district judges, and those judges are confirmed by the Senate, nominated by the President, and have life tenure. I'm a magistrate judge. We are selected for 8-year terms, which are renewable. There's a lengthy application process. Quite frankly, my selection process took about exactly a year.
Wow.
You fill out a very lengthy application, and then you meet with a panel. It's called a merit selection panel. The idea being this panel of attorneys and non-attorneys, people in the community, both people are selected from Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton, the 3 cities of court, that they're supposed to pick the people who have the most merit, quite frankly, and so that's why it's called a merit selection panel. And then you have to be interviewed by the judges, and in my case there were 2 sets of interviews with the judges, and then once you're selected you have to go through a very extensive FBI background check, which takes many months, and after that you're finally sworn in as a federal judge.
Well, congratulations on
Thank you,
making
Diane.
it through over all of those hurdles, because it
Thank
sounds
you.
like it was
Thank
a
you,
lot. But
thank
you
you,
didn't. You got there by earning quite a number of honors on the way.
that's very nice of you to say.
The way you've served your profession. So, again, thank you for coming tonight.
I'm honored to be here.
Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about just a brief overview, a brief lesson here about the federal court system and its role vis-a-vis the state court system. I'm not sure everybody is as clear about that.
Sure, and I think this personally is important.
Yeah.
I know I had some very rudimentary civics when I was in high school, which was a long time ago, but I talk a lot about civics, quite frankly, because I'm not really sure people know in the public how the court system works. So very simply, there's 3 branches of government. The court system is the 3rd branch of government, frequently referred to as the 3rd branch. In the United States, we've got 2 court systems, a state court system and a federal court system. And a state court, the state courts are called courts of general jurisdiction, meaning any cases can be tried there. And in fact, some would say that the presumption is that most cases go to the state court system. And the state court system here in Ohio has municipal courts. Those are trial courts, has the courts of common pleas. Those are trial courts for more complicated matters and matters where there's more money at stake. And then there's a court of appeals in the state system. Here in Dayton, it's the Second District Court of Appeals, and then there's the Ohio Supreme Court. There's a similar system of courts in the federal system, but the federal system of courts are of limited jurisdiction, meaning you have to demonstrate to the judge, to the court, how your case belongs in federal court and why it belongs in federal court. And on the civil side, there's two basic ways. One is called diversity jurisdiction, meaning you've got parties from two different states, typically Ohio and some other states. So someone from California sues someone from New York City, California or New York City would sue someone from here in Ohio.
Right.
That's diversity jurisdiction, two different states. And you have to have that plus more than $75,000 at issue. That's the diversity category.
All right.
The other category is the federal question category, which means there's a federal law or the Constitution that's involved. So if you claim you were discriminated on the basis of your race or your age, there's a federal statute that has to do with that. Or your employee benefits were somehow violated, and that would be an ERISA. That's a federal statute. That would get you into federal court. So that's the civil side. The criminal side of federal court is you violated a federal law. So there's a federal law that would prohibit, for example, drugs, taking drugs across state lines. That would get you into federal court. And in our federal court, there's a trial system, a court of appeals, and a Supreme Court. So the trial court, we're in the Southern District of Ohio. So that's Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton. Those three cities make up our trial court. And then the Sixth Circuit is the Court of Appeals. That's based in Cincinnati. And so any appeal from the federal judge here in Dayton would go down to Cincinnati. That's called the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then those appeals are heard on what's called discretionary review, meaning the court can say yes or no. Those go to the Supreme Court of the United States in Washington, of course. The fancy word is called certiorari, which means the Supreme Court can decide to hear the case or not hear the case. So it's kind of if you think about it, a triangle, if you will. More and more cases are down at the trial court, and cases are heard by judges or by juries, or they're settled, or some cases the judges decide the case shouldn't proceed, and so they dismiss the case or grant summary judgment against it. That's a large number of cases. A smaller number go to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and very, very, very few cases, the nature of about 100 or so, maybe less, make it to the United States Supreme Court in Washington.
Right. Oh, great. Well, thank you for that very excellent
Hope that makes,
overview.
Hopefully that makes sense to you,
Diane. It does. It makes perfect sense. What is the caseload like between people that are coming because they live in California or New York and they want to sue somebody in Ohio, or what's the breakout of the caseload for the civil cases?
There's a surprisingly large number of cases of people from other states coming here to Dayton, either because, mostly because they have civil suits, quite frankly.
Okay.
I do a lot of mediation. We settle lots and lots of cases. That's one of the things I spend a lot of my time on. And I think I do that. It's a public service. It's a public service our court offers. It's also free. There's no charge, unlike if you were to use a private mediator. And I think judges as mediators, I think people trust you, and I think we do a good job. In our court, Judge Ovington and I, who's the other magistrate judge, we do a lot of mediation and settle lots of cases. But frequently, I will see lawyers from all across the country, and quite frankly, it surprises even me when I'll prepare for a mediation. I realize, my goodness, the lawyers are here from California and they've flown to Dayton just to mediate this case.
Yes.
I've had lawyers from Washington D.C., from New York City, from California, quite frankly, from all over the place. So it's surprising a large number of cases that work out that way.
And the large number is about how?
Well, I have about 150 cases on my docket, so I couldn't give you a specific number, but I'd say a fair portion of those are from where lawyers are outside of Ohio.
Wow, and are we higher than other courts?
I don't think so. I think the federal courts, quite frankly, are inclined to hear these diversity cases where people come from different states, and one of the theories is that it's really a nationwide court system. That's one thing we didn't talk about before. When you have state courts, they're permitted to be different state by state and sometimes county by county in terms of their practice. They're statewide, there's a system of rules called rules of civil procedure. But the federal court system is really, it's a nationwide basis of courts. And so the theory is that the judges, because of the selection process and because of the federal rules of civil procedure, which are a uniform basis of rules, that the federal courts are really supposed to be uniform as much as you can be throughout the country. So if you're, for example, a party in California and you've gotten sued by somebody here in Dayton, I think many of those people want to be in federal court because they know the rules are not going to be different because it's Ohio. It's going to be a uniform basis of rules, and in many instances, people feel that they will be treated that way, and so they understand what the rules are and how the cases will proceed.
I see. I see. Well, that sounds like a lot of your work then in mediating those. What about the criminal side? Do we have a heavy load of that in your court?
So I apologize for interrupting you.
No, you're good.
Just so much to tell you about
I like it.
How the court works. So yes, we're a very, very busy court. One thing we have here in Dayton, which does not exist in many cities around the country, is we have a large misdemeanor docket that comes out of, in our case, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is a federal facility. So crimes involving civilians that occur on the base or near the base come to our court and are litigated in our court. And that's one of the largest dockets of that kind in the whole United States, here in Dayton. So as a magistrate judge, I'm only permitted to hear misdemeanors, not felonies, but I can hear misdemeanors in their entirety, and I hear the beginning of felony cases, deciding issues such as bail and then appointment of counsel, and then I refer the case over to the district judge. But we're very, very busy hearing misdemeanors, both that come from the VA facility, the VA hospital here in Dayton, from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then on the felony end, we just have a very, very busy docket here. I think most federal courts do, quite frankly. And I hear, as I said, the bail issues and the appointment of counsel issues in those felony cases.
Right. Well, with the exception of the uniqueness of Wright-Pat and that role, hearing cases that come from conflicts that happen out there or crimes or whatever that happen out there. Is there anything that you think your court system sees more of than, say, a court in California or a federal court in New York?
Probably not. We have it's been in the report of the news. I'm not disclosing anything that's not public. There's a lot of drug cases, in both here in Dayton, throughout the Southern District, and then in the federal court nationally. Large proportion of drug cases, heroin cases, other kinds of cases, and those cases are taken very seriously. They're litigated extensively, and so I see quite a bit of those cases.
Okay, that's a shame, but it's got to happen. Talk a little bit about the role of the federal court system when it comes to swearing in new citizens.
Sure.
That's a whole different line of work than what we've talked about up till now.
One of the nicest things we do. So if you ask any federal judge across the country, what makes you happy?
We're going to come right back to that. We have a call, being told that there's a caller on the line, so we'll hear their call and come right back.
All right.
Yes, you're on the air. We'd like to hear your question.
Yes, thank you for this show. I think Dayton is very lucky to have a judge of Judge Newman's caliber here in this area. We're very fortunate. I have two questions. My only uncertainty is whether either one of them pertain to the work of the Ombudsman, but I'm sure the judge will tell me. The first question has to do with housing issues. Of course, housing does have government inspectors and is partly regulated, but in the Dayton area, I've frequently encountered absentee landlords who are living in California or New York or Florida, and it's very hard for tenants to pursue problems in cases like that. So that's my first question. How does the court intersect with that dimension of housing? And my second question is more topical. The current case before the Supreme Court of public sector union fees. I'm just interested in what way that the outcome of that case may impact public sector unions here in Dayton and the Montgomery County area.
Well, thank you very much for those questions, and we will get some answers here. Let's start with the first, the housing and absentee landlords.
Sure. So I will tell you that most housing disputes traditionally are handled in the state courts versus the federal courts. I have had some not housing cases, but I have had cases involving property of different types where they're out-of-state landlords. And one of the issues that seems to me that I've had in those cases is service upon the defendant. You know, you can only have a lawsuit if the defendant or defendants plural gets served, and that has been an issue that I've noticed in some of the cases that I've had. But typically, the housing cases are heard more in state court than in the federal court.
Okay, thank you. And on to part two. Is that something you can talk about?
Probably not. With all due respect to the caller, Diane and I were chatting before the program began that it's probably best that I not talk about pending cases in the court, whether it's our court or another federal court, because ethically that probably wouldn't be the smart thing to do. So with all due respect to the caller, I'll refrain from answering that question, but we'll wait and see what the Supreme Court does with that issue.
Excuse me, that's right, and we'll just have you back later on when it's all said and done.
I do thank the caller for the call.
And we'll just see how that goes. Let's spend just a few minutes in talking about what you would define as some of the most important landmark decisions that have happened in the past that impact citizens, maybe even more frequently or in a larger degree than what they're even able. So I'm not going to prompt you by listing a lot of legal decisions, but like in the past 10 years, if you would just like to comment on a few.
I'd be happy. And I'll also, before I do that, if it's okay, Dan, I'll go back just a second and tell you about the naturalizations we do. I know before the call came in, you had asked me about that.
You're right.
One of the things that I think any federal judge loves to do is a naturalization. So this is a ceremony that we have in our court. We do it about once a month, and you or your members from your staff from your office have been so kind to come and speak. And this is when the citizens become citizens, quite frankly. And I think it's a wonderful thing because literally at the beginning of this 1-hour session of our court, you've done all the work required to become a citizen, but you're not a citizen yet. We spend about an hour together. There's a court hearing and a proceeding, and you take the oath of citizenship, at the end of which you are a citizen with all the rights and responsibilities of being a citizen. And one of the great things I think we do in Dayton is that we invite members of the community to come in and talk to the new citizens, whether it's the Ombudsman office, or it can be the Montgomery County Public Library, the League of Women Voters to make sure people register to vote, Montgomery, the fair housing agencies here to make sure that people are not discriminated against, and many, many other nonprofits and agencies. And I think it's one of the great things we do to get new citizens, to make them feel that they're part of the community, that it's an immigrant-friendly community, that we welcome them. One of the touching things that we do that I think is very important, and I know you've been very involved in this, is yes, you're a judge wearing a robe, and you're presiding over this naturalization ceremony. But when it's done, you leave the robe on, but you come down and you shake. I shake all of the hands of every single citizen, meet their families. We'll take as many pictures as they want, welcome them, greet them, let them know that they're part of the fabric of our culture. And me personally, I'm very much an advocate of diversity and inclusiveness, and make them feel that they're welcome.
Right.
And I think as a judge, you don't get to do that very often, because so many times what you're doing is deciding who wins and who loses in a very complicated case, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. And in the context of mediation, you're trying to settle very, very complicated cases that people have sometimes been fighting for years. And one thing I think it's worth talking about is the cases that typically come to federal court are really complicated. They're just, I'm not sure I've ever seen a simple dispute in our court, quite frankly. And so sometimes the cases that I get to mediate have been litigated for years and years. And so those are difficult cases to resolve. And likewise, when you have a hearing or a trial, those are difficult matters, and someone goes away happy and someone goes away disappointed. In the case of mediation, even if both sides agree to settle, and we're very successful at settling cases, many times the people are they're upset because they're not really 100% happy with the outcome, but it's an outcome they can live with, and so they agree to settle their dispute. That's not the case.
And it does settle the dispute.
Oh,
it gets it settled
with
and
finality.
There's relief with that.
With finality. Yeah. And so the advantage of naturalization is it's nice, it's friendly, people smile, and every one of those I've done, and I've done many at this point, both by myself and many in Dayton. Many of the judges like to do them together. Yeah. Everyone is happy, and that's a wonderful thing. So you did mention mediation, and I would be a derelict if I didn't talk about it just for a moment. So I think one of the best things we do in Dayton is we're very successful, Judge Ovington and I, at settling cases, quite frankly, and we do a large number of them. And one thing I'm known for is I will stay late into the night, whatever it takes to get a case settled. So we'll start early in the morning, and we'll have both sides together. Together meaning they're in the same building, but frequently they're in separate rooms. Sometimes there's such a discord between them that they don't even want to see each other. One case I had, we had one side in the trial court and the district court in our courthouse, and the other side was across the street in the bankruptcy court. So they wanted to be sure that they never saw each other, that they went to lunch at separate times, that they arrived at separate times, and we accommodated all that. You okay?
Yes.
Because
fine.
I thought it was better to try to get the dispute
Right,
resolved. And
right.
I think really you're doing a public service as a judge if you can help bring some resolution to these disputes that have just dragged on for years and years and years. And we will spend as long as it takes that day. We don't stop at 5 o'clock. I've gone till midnight, probably 1 o'clock in the morning on occasion. And we're just talking, and I'm doing shuttle diplomacy, typically with a lawyer who works with me, my law clerk, and we're going back and forth until finally you think, okay, maybe the pieces are going to come together. And hopefully they do, and then we write a very simple settlement agreement, and then people go, back home, and the case is resolved. But in some instances, that's not the case, and so we will spend days, sometimes weeks, on the telephone. In fact, that's partially what I did today, picking up the phone and talking to people and seeing, okay, we spent a day together with me in court. We're not really there yet, but we're close. What do we need to do? How do we get the pieces to fit together so that this case does get resolved? And you might think, my goodness, that's a lot of time to spend. But you have to understand that these are cases which, if they proceed, to trial will take weeks to try in front of a judge. So you're saving the court weeks of a trial. You're also trying to bring something to resolution which it seems to me as a judge that when closure happens, people are happy. You can just see like the weight just lifting off their shoulders. I've had instances where literally at the end of a mediation, people they can tell the case is going to settle, and they're smiling for the first time in the 12 hours or so that we've been together. And the one thing that the good and the bad about the court system is, the good is it's the best system in the world. It's the best system of justice, not only in the United States, but I believe, in the world, in terms of resolving disputes, taking cases seriously, having a body of case law and a body of statutory law that's taken very, very seriously by everybody who works in the system and working towards a just and fair resolution. But what comes with that is the fact that cases can be expensive to litigate, very time-consuming to litigate, and there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with that, because think about it. Whoever loses in our court, like we talked about 15 minutes ago, gets to go down to Cincinnati and have an appeal. Well, that could be a year-and-a-half process or so. And then it's conceivable that the Court of Appeals says, okay, Judge Newman, you were right, or Judge Newman, you were wrong. Hopefully they say we were right. But I have seen instances where the court has, in Cincinnati, the Sixth Circuit has said, there's one little thing we would have done slightly different. Send the case back to Dayton. That little issue needs to be relitigated. So what this means is there's more time, there's more expense, the case seems to drag on. And to me, if you can bring something to resolution in a more efficient manner, you're serving the public's interest by doing that. So I think it's worth the time that I spend to litigate those cases and help people, and help mediation, help the litigation process to come to a peaceful resolution wherever I can.
Yes, and let the people move on with whatever needs to come next for them. Yeah.
I think it's surprising to people, Diane, that when you sit down and you talk to them about how long cases really will take in our court, and sometimes lawyers have said that, many times lawyers have told that to their clients, but it's like they don't believe it until they hear a judge say it. It's a very interesting phenomenon that I think I understand, but I'm not really sure I understand 100%, but I'm telling you that I've had many instances of mediation where I sit the parties down, like as close as you and I are, and I say, let me just make eye contact with you and tell you, this is what's going to happen to your case if we don't settle it. And people are surprised. You can kind of see the light bulb going off, and they realize, oh my gosh, I may have another couple years of no resolution of this dispute. I don't want that in my life. I want
Right.
you to help me bring this to some resolution.
Well, it's very good impetus for people to come to
Well,
a
it's probably
settlement.
along the same lines of
Yeah.
what you do,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
as an
Exactly.
ombudsperson,
Yeah.
you're
There's
resolving disputes, right?
a lot of that.
And you're helping things come to
Right,
resolution.
and
I
try
think,
to
I
get
think,
that
I think
finished.
that's important.
Yes, it's very important. It is a public service. Thank you for coming back to that about the naturalization and a little
Sure.
bit more on mediation. It's a very important function in our community and in our nation completely. Let's go back to about the past 10 years. Let's look back over what you think are some of the most significant cases at whatever level you want to talk about for impacting citizens.
Well,
and
there's so
making
many.
change.
I thought you might ask this question, and I'm not even sure where to begin, quite frankly, because
Okay.
there's so many cases to talk about. I will tell you that I think this is the way I'm going to answer the question, and it's not a direct answer because I'm afraid if I talk about something, I'm going to slight something else. So I don't want to do that. But I will tell you this, which I think is it's kind of more indirect way of answering the question. The judges that I work with, and Judge Rose, Judge Rice, Judge Ovington, and Judge Mers, I feel very lucky to be in Dayton, quite frankly, because the judges here take the cases they have very, very seriously. It's a really hard group of judges who come to work every day, dedicated, who want to follow the law, who want to be careful about what they do, who don't want to make a mistake, who take the litigants before them very seriously, who listen, who don't prejudge cases, who are patient and are fair, and they want to follow the law. And when I was a litigator, I said to myself, if I ever had a chance to be a judge, I wanted to be a judge. And the big reason for that is there are judges out there, not in Dayton, thank goodness, but there are judges out there who prejudge cases. And as a lawyer, you go in to argue in front of a judge, and you could tell the judge has already made up their mind. And sometimes they'll tell you they've already made up their mind before you even make your argument. Obviously, no judge should be that way, and we don't have judges like that in Dayton, thank goodness. And I think that's very important. And I think my indirect way of answering your question is to say the judges we have here take the cases very seriously. They follow the law, which is very important, and they care about justice. And what more could you possibly want than that? Right. I mean, I go to work every day, and I think that I'm very lucky because I get to be fair. I get to render justice. I get to help resolve disputes. I get to help people. I like lawyers. I like the legal community, and I let people speak. And I think very long and hard about the decision I'm about to make. And I try very, very hard to follow law and to be fair.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit then about citizens and their role in the court when they're not litigants, such as jurors, when they come in and they're not getting naturalized and they're not filing, but they're jurors. How does the jury system work in your court?
So we have
I think it's different, is it not?
Right. Okay. So we have a very, very nice gentleman, James Tosto, who's in charge of the jury pool at the federal court in Dayton. He does a great work. He works in the clerk's office. We draw a jury pool from the number of surrounding counties that surround Dayton. My understanding is that it comes from driver's license records. And I'll just go on record by saying to all those who have served, who are asked to serve in a jury, the court is grateful. I'm certainly grateful for your service, and I know that it's hard to be a juror because it takes time away from your family, it takes time away from work. But the system would not work without jury service. It's very, very important. So I commend all of those of you who have served and will be serving in the future. There's also something called a grand jury, which very few people outside the legal community know about, and that is a group of individuals who are asked to serve for a longer period. It can be, as I understand, up to 18 months. More of a secret proceeding, but that's the process by which individuals can be indicted. And those individuals are presented with information by a prosecutor and decide whether to issue indictments or not. So there's a petit jury and there's a grand jury. In our court here in Dayton, we also have a number of individuals who file lawsuits pro se, which is something I thought you might want to ask about. So you asked about how do citizens get involved in the court system. Well, one way, if you don't have a lawyer, you're called proceeding pro se. And we do have a large number of pro se litigants in our court, whether it's here in Dayton or in Cincinnati or in Columbus. The magistrate judges, I'm one of them, are the ones that see those cases in the first instance. In other words, they review those cases and they review them for a number of issues. We take that very, very seriously, and we've have a very good track record of trying to get counsel for people who appear pro se to assist them in the litigation of their cases.
And how do you do that?
Well, one way is we refer them to bar associations like the Dayton Bar Association. Sure. There's a lawyer referral service here as part of the DBA. I've had requests by pro se litigants to put their case in an abeyance. The word we use is a stay, to stay their case for some very short period of time while they try to find counsel. I refer them to the lawyer referral service, and they do a very good job, quite frankly, of finding counsel for pro se litigants.
Okay. And how many what percentage or how many of your cases do you then end up having juries for? Because you're doing a lot of mediation, it sounds
here's
like.
a fascinating result. Yeah. Very few.
Yeah.
I think people would be fascinated to realize that the court system, both here in Dayton and I think throughout the country, from my perspective, is very different from what you see on television. If you watch television, whether it's Law and Order, whatever show you watch, you see lots of jury trials, and at least on the civil side throughout the United States in the federal court system, there are far fewer jury trials than there used to be. And people and judges and scholars and those in the legal community argue back and forth all the time whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. And the fancy phrase is the vanishing jury trial. I have attended and probably spoken at many seminars even where this very topic is discussed. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? There's a number of factors that explain it. One factor is that we have many more instances of mediation than we used to have.
Right.
You can go to a judge to be a mediator. You can hire a private mediator if you want. Sometimes the lawyers themselves will actually talk, and they'll just on their own will settle the case. So lots of cases get resolved that way. And then there's also instances where a judge, after reviewing the case very carefully, can say that the case, for different reasons, for perhaps a time constraints like a statute of limitation violation, doesn't merit proceeding further. There can be a motion to dismiss the case, and there's also another motion much later in the case called a motion for summary judgment, where after lots and lots of discovery has gone on, sometimes a year or more of discovery, one party can come to the court and say, Your Honor, I don't think this case merits proceeding to trial on one claim or multiple claims or perhaps all the claims. And then that takes a number of months for a judge to look at the case, very carefully sift through the evidence and see whether the motion for summary judgment should be granted or denied. And that's something else that judges spend quite a bit of time going on. So with all those reasons, that has limited, I believe, that's my personal view, the number of cases of going to trial.
Very interesting. Let's talk a little bit then about the special services that are coming now through the federal court. We have a re-entry type of program that is in federal court, and I'd like you to inform viewers a little bit about what that role is and what you do with respect to that situation.
Sure. Be happy to. So I'm very proud of the fact we have a reentry court here in Dayton. I think, it's one of the best things that we do, quite frankly. Judge Rice gets all the credit. It was Judge Rice's idea to do a reentry court, and we've had multiple sessions. The first one with Judge Rice and Judge Ovington, and then Judge Rose and I did the second session, and now it's back to Judge Rice and Judge Ovington. And these are efforts to help people as they come out of prison. They've done felony convictions. They've done many years in federal prison, who come out and they're supervised as part of their incarceration. Once the incarceration is over, they're supervised by the probation department in our court. Fancy word is supervised release, and it's an effort to supplement that supervised release and make sure that supervised release is successful. So what we do in our court is the individuals, we call them participants, they come to the court once a month, between 5 and 10, and their progress is monitored very, very carefully by two judges, by probation officers, by assistant U.S. attorneys, by federal public defenders, and by those in a team approach. We have a number of social service agencies, including Goodwill Easter Seals and a number of others to help people successfully transition into being a successful member of society and not going back to prison. And this is a really very, very involved effort because it's the people, the participants, it's hard. I mean, I'm just very sensitive as a judge how hard it is coming out of prison, whether it's federal prison or state prison, and transitioning back into society. There's all sorts of issues like where do you live and how do you interact with your children who you may not have seen for a number of years. And what do you do about child support, and what do you do about getting a job, and a job that will allow you to provide for yourself, and then staying away from people who may get you one, send you back to prison, and staying off drugs if that's your issue. All sorts of issues. I will also tell you that in the past 6 months or so, again under Judge Rice's leadership, we've started another effort called Restored Citizens, where the judges go into the west side of Dayton. We've been going to the Potter's House Church on a Saturday once a month to bring services to individuals and their families in the hope that more of a family approach, that people see that there's a better life out there, and the reasons and the ability not to go back to prison. And the big part of that is, among many other agencies, we've been working with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to help people get driving privileges back, and if possible to get their records expunged so they can be successful and they can succeed on the outside. And there's some issues that for many seem simple, but if you can't drive a car and you're limited to public transportation and you have a third shift job, it's hard to make it. So the court and I personally am very sensitive to these issues, and we work very, very hard and very, really diligently to try to make people succeed. And the court wants individuals to succeed. And this is a really fascinating program where we're saying to people, this is the very judge that sent you to prison who now wants you, now that you're out of prison, to succeed and do well, and we're gonna work together to make sure that happens. And that doesn't happen in many federal courts in the country. It's really a tribute to Dayton.
That's great. We have a caller that has a question for us, so thank you for calling the program. We'd love to hear your question.
Oh, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I know you spoke a little bit earlier about judges who begin to prejudge cases, and you got your position largely based on your merits, and I imagine that one of those merits is being unbiased. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you remain unbiased. I know you're a judge, but you are a human too, and we often get burnt out when we do things for a long time. So how do you manage that struggle?
Sure. So
okay, thank you very much.
It's a very interesting question. It's a very serious question.
It is.
I think the good and the bad about being a judge is that sometimes it's a lonely profession, quite frankly. I don't feel like I can socialize with many of the people that I did when I was a practicing lawyer, and I do that because I think that's my way of not having any bias, quite frankly. Trying to keep myself removed a little bit. And you'll find most judges around the country, whether in the state system or the federal system, are that way. So the focus of my life is I go to work, and as Diane well knows, my wife and I, Rachel, have triplets. I spend most of my time with Rachel and the triplets, and then I go back to work. One of the reasons I do it that way is that so you stay unbiased. And the other thing is you have to be honest about yourself and with yourself. And if for some reason you feel, and I've never had this, but I don't think this has ever happened to me, but if you have to be honest, if you feel like you have some sort of bias, well, then you can't hear that case, obviously. Another thing is there's federal rules on this that if, for example, you have a bank account at a certain bank, well, then obviously you couldn't hear a case involving that bank because you potentially would have an interest. Right. And I think part of this is, and I think this should give the caller confidence in the seriousness by which I take these cases and other judges take these cases. It's the appearance of impropriety. So not only is there something that's wrong, but even the appearance of something that's wrong. So you stay away from that, by a factor of 1,000 or 10,000 or what have you. You live your life in a way that you appear as fair, and you think about fairness. I mean, I think about being fair. That's what I do, and I think one of the things that we have to our credit in Dayton is the judges take all of this very seriously, and the judges that have been selected here take this idea of being unbiased very, very seriously, as you have to.
So it sounds like it's kind of a combination of a set of rules that one can follow, but then also personal choice and decision making.
Correct.
We have yet another caller on the line. We'd like to hear your question. You're on the air.
Have you had an increased caseload because of the Senate's unwillingness to approve appointments to the federal bench?
I think I heard that. Did you hear it?
Right. So
Thank you.
It's a very interesting issue. I have, to my knowledge, I have not, and I don't think at the moment
We might need to repeat that
Okay.
for our viewers. I'm not sure how well they can hear the question.
Sure, I'll be happy. Unless you want to, Diane.
go
I'll be
right
happy
ahead.
to.
Go right ahead.
So forgive me.
No,
the
it's
question, as I heard it, was: have I had an increased number of cases because of the Senate's alleged delay in confirming judges? I have not. But I am very sensitive to that issue. In the interest of full disclosure, I am very involved in the Federal Bar Association, which is a bar association of lawyers around the country, about 17,000 lawyers and judges who practice in the federal courts. And in fact, next year I'll be the national president of the FBA.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Diane. And
more work.
more work. It's a great honor, and FBA is an organization I care very, very much about because it advocates for funding of the federal courts so that cases can be resolved fairly and on time. And one of the things that the FBA has really pushed the last 5 or more years, probably more years than that, is the speedy confirmation of judges. And this has been an issue around the country. I think we're lucky in Ohio; it's not such a big issue here. But in other parts of the country, it's a very significant issue where people who it takes a long time to get nominated to be a judge. It gets a long time to be confirmed. Some judges or potential judges are out there waiting for long periods of time to hopefully be confirmed. And this is certainly an issue, and it means that there can be and has been a backlog of cases in the federal court. I think we're lucky here in our district. We don't have that issue. Other districts are not so fortunate.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear that about Ohio. We were speaking before our callers with their good questions about the reentry court program. Did you have something further to say on that? Because I wanted to ask, how long is a person normally with you going through this program?
Sure. So maybe I wasn't specific enough. I should have said more detail, but. The system that we worked, we created a point system. Judge Rose really created it, that it's theoretically possible you could get through reentry court in 6-month period, but really more close to a year is more realistic. And I've personally found that it's, I think, to these participants' advantage to stay in reentry court longer because it's a support system. You have the option once you graduate from reentry court that you can turn around and be a mentor to other individuals who are trying to make it through the reentry court process. We've had a number of people who have become mentors and have become very, very successful here in Dayton, going out in the community, talking to people, trying to convince them to not to do crime and go to prison in the first place, but those who have come out of prison, trying to help them, whether they're in the court's reentry court program or not, trying to help them succeed. It's just a very, very important effort. I mean, it really is to me, it's an example of the great thing about Dayton, the community pulling together to make people succeed and to help them succeed.
Yes, and you mentioned also going into the community to bring families in. Right. Is it difficult to get families to come into the court, and so you need to go out? Tell us about that outreach program.
Sure. So this is a program that Judge Sargas up in Columbus, who's now our Chief Judge, so Chief Judge Sargas started. They've done it for a couple of years up there, mostly on Saturdays, occasionally on Fridays, and it's proven to be very, very successful. And Judge Rice and I went up to Columbus about a year and a half ago, independently saw how successful it was, and really Judge Rice gets the credit. He was the initiator of it, but I was lucky enough to tag along with him. And we've replicated that effort really under his leadership here in Dayton. We've done a number of Saturdays so far. We're considering possibly doing it on some Fridays as well. It's proven very, very successful as really bringing the community together, helping people, helping their families as well. I think the reentry court effort in our court is really designed for the individuals themselves that have come out of prison. The Restored Citizen Project in the community is really more of a community project to help the families as well as the individuals.
That's excellent, wonderful. I'd also like to turn to a little bit different subject now, one that my office also hears a great deal about, and that is Social Security. Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot of Social Security cases, and have they increased in the past number of years, and give us an overview about what's comes to your court with Social Security.
Sure. So for those of you outside the federal court system who may not know how the system works, we're talking about Social Security disability cases where people have an alleged disability, which you can have on many different bases. And the process is you go to Social Security and apply, and in the cases that I see, the individuals are turned down for disability. So in other words, the Social Security believes they're not disabled and therefore wouldn't be entitled to benefits, and then you get a hearing in front of an administrative law judge, which is a judge, but a different kind of judge than I am. That judge is employed by Social Security, and then if you're still turned down, then you get to appeal to our court, to the U.S. District Court. Theoretically, you could go from our court to the Sixth Circuit and then to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we hear many of these appeals, and one a week, sometimes two a week. Most of the individuals have lawyers. The medical records are very thick. Now we're doing everything electronically. We didn't talk about electronic filing, but our court has moved to a system where you don't have all this paper that you bring to the clerk's office. You file everything electronically, but when we do print these files out to read them, and I review them very carefully, we're talking a file of medical records that thick, because these cases are frequently, by the time they come to our court, they've been litigated in Social Security and before an administrative law judge for quite some time. We've had a very large increase. I couldn't tell you the specific number, but a very large increase in the number of Social Security cases. The issues that come before me is whether we affirm the non-disability decision of the administrative law judge, whether we find there was a mistake of a legal nature that requires the case to go back to the administrative law judge for another hearing. Sometimes we're also able to determine under the law that, yes, there was a mistake made, but it would only delay the process by sending the case back, so we're going to just flat out reverse the administrative law judge and award benefits, which I've done, have been affirmed by the Sixth Circuit for doing so. I'm proud of the really careful nature and the record that we have in reviewing these cases carefully, thinking about them carefully, doing so on a timely basis. Personally, it's been very frustrating to me, the thought that people who are potentially disabled and therefore can't work and therefore can't pay their mortgage and all the other issues that come along with that those cases are in the federal court not be decided on a timely basis. So I work very hard, very long hours to try to move these cases along as efficiently as quickly as I possibly can.
Okay. Are most of them then taken to the 6th District by the Social Security routinely, try to move them up?
So here's a really interesting thing. I find this fascinating. When I clerked, I don't know, probably better part of 15 or 20 years ago, down in Cincinnati, it was very common that whatever the judge in my court did, that they were appealed to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. That does not seem to be happening now. Most of the cases, it seems to me, kind of anecdotally, stop at our court. And I think that also just imposes upon our judges a higher burden, knowing that really, in many respects, you're the court of last resort, that it's, yes, there are some cases that are going to be appealed to the Sixth Circuit, but it's the rare case that's going to be appealed to the Sixth Circuit.
That's a good thing. Are there any common threads in the types of cases? They're all, or they're...
Well, there's legally the threads you see. Many people, of course, have a treating doctor, and the requirement on an administrative law judge to look at a treating doctor, it's very specific, and it's a very complicated manner in which you do that. And sometimes I found that has not been followed specifically as it's required to under the law, and so that's a recurring legal issue. It's a little technical, but that's a recurring legal issue that I see about treating physicians, and we've published a number of cases about that. And so the analysis of a treating physician's report and analysis that requires us to look at the cases very carefully.
And so is it, clearly it's your hope that your decision then is going to bring about change at that level, that they've decided, and you're saying you need to look at this kind of material.
Correct.
So hopefully going forward that will be reviewed in a different manner.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, we take a long time. We do them timely, but we take a long time and take those cases very seriously because, one
it's
thing...
complicated.
It's complicated, and I vowed if I ever got to be a judge, I would never lose the sight of the fact that these are people's lives that are in your hand. And you have a decision to follow the law, obviously, but more importantly, to do what's right and just. And every case is of incredible utmost importance to the people that are litigating it. You can never, ever forget that. And that's the thing I remind myself every day when I come to work that, you're talking about people's lives here, whether it's the criminal side or the civil side or a Social Security disability case or mediation, where someone may see a judge one time their whole life. And you take that. I take that very, very seriously.
Yes, because it's going to make an enormous impact on their lives.
Yes.
It's very
And I think
significant.
it's important for people to realize in the public, and one of the reasons I want to do the show and chat with you is for people to know how seriously, that at least in speaking purely for myself, that I take these cases. And I understand there's a heavy burden, right? I mean, if you're a judge and you take being a judge very seriously, that's a serious responsibility, and I do take that very seriously.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that. I also wanted to hear a little bit more about the Veterans Court that you had mentioned to me.
So,
I didn't get to ask very much in detail about it, but so give us an overview about what's happening there.
I'm smiling talking about
Yeah.
it because this is something that brings joy to my heart. This makes me very happy. So if you'll
Good.
forgive me for just a minute, I'll just tell you a quick background.
Please do.
So through the Federal Bar Association, which I've been involved with for many, many years, I happened to meet Judge Warner, who is a magistrate judge like me. He sits in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the District of Utah. And he previously was the head prosecutor, the U.S. attorney for the District of Utah. And he also has a military background. So when he became a magistrate judge, he told me, I've met him before, that he noticed that there were all these veterans that were coming before him, charged with misdemeanors. And he said it seemed to him that what they really needed was not to be prosecuted, which was just going to not solve the problem, but they needed treatment is what they really needed, whether it's drug treatment or psychiatric treatment, or sometimes they were homeless and needed a place to live. Sometimes they're self-medicated because of PTSD, all sorts of problems, and what they really needed was for the treatment. And he said at the same time, the Veterans Hospital was trying to reach out, the VA hospital there, was trying to reach out to these veterans and trying to get them the treatment. And it seemed like this was a perfect fit where both sides wanted the same thing. The veterans needed the treatment, the VA hospital wanted to give them treatment, and the court was the way to facilitate all this. So he started, probably 5 years ago, it might be a little bit longer, but about 5 years ago, the first federal veterans court in the United States. Now, there have been a number of state court veterans courts, Judge Atkins here in the Common Pleas Court in Montgomery County, among them, who's done a fabulous job, and I give him a lot of credit. He's really done an amazing job. And a number of the municipal courts now are starting it, but it hasn't really caught on very much in the federal arena. I had a chance to meet Judge Warner, hear how excited he was, and I thought, well, my goodness, we could do the same thing here in Dayton. We've got a large Veterans Administration hospital. I hear, as does Judge Evington, many of these misdemeanor cases frequently, things like a veteran will allegedly go in for medical treatment and be standing in line, and something will happen, and they'll get in a fight with a nurse, and next thing you know, they're charged with disorderly conduct. Those kinds of cases. Or for some reason, the veteran will be patted down at the facility and will realize that they've got a flask of liquor or a firearm or all sorts of things, right? Those are the kinds of cases that we see. So we, Judge Rice and Judge Rose, spoke to Judge Warner extensively and learned how the Veterans Court works there. And at my urging and with their blessing, we've started a Veterans Court. It's a bit of a pilot project right now. It's only been started in the last 6 months. They asked me to be the presiding judge. I think this is a fantastic thing. And I'm hoping once we get it up and running and get all the kinks out of it, that the program's going to expand. And I'm hoping that we're going to hear many cases here in Dayton. And the hope is that we're going to get the veterans the treatment that they need, that they deserve. The Veterans Administration Hospital nationally has hired social workers. They're called Veteran Justice Outreach Coordinators, VJOs for short. And here in Dayton, there are 2 VJOs, and their whole job is to get the services to the veterans. And so the court, using this as a facilitative effort, is bringing all these entities together.
And to bring that together.
And it's a totally voluntary process. Every veteran I have, I first make sure that they actually are a veteran and they qualify for the services the VA offers. And then we say, you don't have to participate in this. It's your choice. But once they realize how beneficial this could be, almost everyone has said yes.
I hope they'll continue to do so. That's
I
a
hope
good
so too,
program,
and we're up and running,
Yes.
and so far it's been quite successful. So I'm very happy and very proud of that effort.
I am afraid we are closing in very quickly
Okay.
on the end of this hour together.
Well, it's been a quick hour, Diane.
It has been a very quick hour, and we've covered a wide amount of material and a lot of information. And I thank you so much for coming on the program.
My honor, my
Enjoyed
pleasure.
it very much.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thanks to the viewers and the callers. Good night.